Hi everyone, and welcome to my April book review. This was a pretty productive month, despite me being stressed out all the time. If I had to guess, I use reading to cope with stress. I don't know. That's just a thought, though. I did end up reading 18 books this month. That counts audiobooks. But yeah, I had a lot of fun. There's a lot of good books. Kind of a good mix. Some good ones, some bad ones, some a lot in the middle. But yeah, let's do this. The first book was an audiobook, and I actually had started it in March and I finished it like the first day of April. This was Iron Widow by Zirin Ray Zhao, I believe is how you pronounce her name. She's a creator here on YouTube. I've watched her stuff before. She's really cool. And I wanted to read her book because I've heard kind of good things about it. Nothing amazing, but pretty good. And I actually enjoyed it a lot. It wasn't anything extraordinary. I don't think it was anything super special, but I did really like it. It's a young adult sci-fi fantasy set in a Chinese-dominated world that's being attacked by aliens. And these aliens are these big creatures that are like huge, think like Godzilla size robots, kind of robots. I'll get into that. And that when they're killed, they can be turned, like the husks of their bodies can be turned into mechs, and then they're operated by humans to then turn against the aliens and fight back. So to operate these mechs, it takes both female and male chi, and the females have weaker chi, so they usually die in fights, leaving the males to then go home and take all the glory for the sacrifice of the woman pilot. I think the concept of the mechs and the chi is really interesting, and I kind of like the world building and the way that the concepts were introduced. It wasn't anything, it was pretty standard as far as a YA fantasy goes or YA sci-fi goes, but it was fine, nothing exceptional. I did like the representation in this book. I won't spoil anything, but there's some romance style representation that you don't normally see in a YA book. In any book, but especially YA. The ending didn't really hit me the way that I thought it would. The story was pretty predictable. I only guessed like one thing wrong, and it turned out to not really be a big deal at all. It fell into that YA trap of the main character is the best to ever do it at whatever that they're doing, which I think is fine. It's a little cheesy, and at this point I'm looking for writing that's a little more nuanced than that. It was still really enjoyable. I had a good time. I ended up giving it 3 stars, and I'm excited for the sequel that's coming out later this year. I'll definitely pick that up when it comes out. Like I said, this was audiobook. This is one that's on my list to pick up a physical copy of because once I think it's already out on paperback, and I would enjoy a paperback version of this. I don't know if I'd give it a reread though. It's probably not that good. Maybe right before the sequel comes out. I don't know. Next, I read Happy Place by Emily Henry. This was my first Emily Henry book, and we love a good romance novel. And this is about as good as a second chance romance can get. I don't really like second chance romances. I think they're a hard sell because I usually start off hating or disliking one of the main characters, if not both of them, due to the mistakes that they made before. So this story follows Harriet and then her longtime friends on a vacation to Maine, and this is their only chance to interact now that they've all kind of gone their separate ways after college. And Harriet broke up with her fiance 5 months before this vacation and never told any of her friends. And her friends were like, "Hey, surprise, we brought your fiance on this trip with us since it's gonna be our last one." And they were like, "Oh, great, now my ex-fiance's here," and they don't know that we broke up. So it's kind of a little bit of fake dating, but it kind of gets resolved fast, and then it's just a second chance romance. I think the male love interest, Win, he had a couple red flags that never really got addressed. Like I said, second chance romances are a hard sell, so that's why I ended up docking half a star and only gave it a 4.5. I love Harriet a lot because I feel like she's just like me. The mistakes she made are exactly the kind of mistakes that I would make in a relationship, and when dealing with the situations that she was in, I could just really relate to it a lot. She is extremely anxious and a people pleaser, and she never wants to step on anyone's toes or rock the boat. And I really like Harriet. So I found her mistakes a lot easier to forgive than Wynn's, but that's probably just because I'm biased and I see myself a lot in Harriet. But it was still really good. This made me love Emily Henry's writing style. This was also an audiobook, but it made me really want to pick up more of her books. So I immediately after finishing this, I've requested all of the other audiobooks from the library because I was like, I want to finish all of her books. Next, so normally I go chronologically. This I decided to group together since I finished this series all in this month of April. So I next read the Shades of Magic series by V.E. Schwab. There is 3 books. It's a trilogy. Overall, well, I guess I'll get to that. I gave the first book, A Darker Shade of Magic, 3.5 stars. To kind of give a synopsis of this, it's a world where there's 4 different multiverses, and they're all connected by different versions of Londons. So there's Grey London, which is just normal modern London. There's Red London, which is where magic is super common and everyone kind of has it. There's White London, where magic is kind of evil and corrupted and the whole world is kind of falling apart. And then there's Black London, which was lost long ago by corrupted magic and no one can ever go there. And our main character, Cal, he's an Antari, which means that he has the power to travel between all of these different multiverses and all these different versions of London. And then the other main character is this girl named Lila, who's from Grey London, and she kind of gets caught up in this mystical quest to deliver this evil artifact back to Black London. I enjoyed the story enough. I think the concept was really, really cool. Unfortunately, I think the character development kind of left a lot to be desired in this first book. Cal and Lila are supposed to have a romance subplot, and I just didn't really care at all. I wasn't not feeling it. And just Cal overall just kind of felt very flat. He was not that likable to me. They do fix this in the later books, but in the first book, I just didn't really care about him. He's supposed to be like the broody, angsty love interest that, misunderstood. But he just kind of seems distant and uninterested and boring. So that was my opinion on him in the first book. But the next book, Gathering of Shadows, I also only gave a 3.5. But that's still good. That means I liked it. A 3 is like I enjoyed the book. A 3.5 means I enjoyed it a little more than average. So a lot of the character issues that I had in the first book were resolved in the second book. It was a lot more focused on character development and dynamics and interactions, and it lets that shine rather than the plot, which is kind of just paper thin in this story. There really is no plot in the second book. It's basically there's like a magic tournament going on and the main characters are competing in it, and it doesn't matter to the main overarching story of the series at all. But it lets you introduce some fun characters. I think if the character elements from the second book were kind of implemented into the first and third book, you could have gotten away with this being a duology. There's really, like I said, there's like no plot in the second book. I'm a sucker for competitions though. And this like elemental competition with high stakes and all the rivals and all the good stuff, this book I would say felt a lot more YA than the other two, other than a couple instances where they focus on the villain and he's kind of doing some gross stuff. But overall, I think it felt a little more YA, a little more fast paced, a lot more character focused, which I liked. And then the last book, A Conjuring of Light, I ended up giving 4 stars. I think this book nailed the blending of plot and character development. It's not too plot heavy, it's not too character heavy. V.E. Schwab finally figured out with these characters and with this plot how to make it all weave together. I think the plot was really predictable, but it was still really fun and I really enjoyed it. I ended up giving this 4 stars, so I didn't say that. I can't lie, the final battle in this book, it had like some end game hype. I was hyped as fuck for the final battle. I was like, hell yeah, dude, let's go. I still don't really see the appeal of Cal. He's fine. I get it. Like, he's whatever. But, like, Alucard is infinitely a better, more interesting love interest. I know what they did with his story was fine. I get it. But, like, imagine if Lila went with Alucard instead. I need some fan fiction about that. I think this series is really good for people who are just trying to get into fantasy. It's a very simple magic system. It's actually elemental based, which reminds me a lot of kind of Avatar's magic system. If people could bend up to 3 elements instead of just 1, and there was 5 elements instead of 4. There's some differences, but it kind of reminds me of it. Everything's going to remind me of Avatar. I think it's, like I said, it's a good entry point for people who want to get into fantasy and haven't been reading for a while or have never tried fantasy before. They're fairly short books compared to some of the monsters that come out of high fantasy. And it's, like I said, simple magic system. And this series is tied up. It's a trilogy, so it's not too long of a commitment, and it's tied up with a really nice bow at the end. So I enjoyed it. I gave the series overall a 3.5, or somewhere between a 3.5 and a 4. It was good. I enjoyed it. I had a fun time. I listened to it all on audiobook. And like I said, especially the last book, I was really hyped for it. It was good. Next, I finally finished Rhythm of War. This book took me a lot longer than the other ones. The other ones took me like a week or two. This one took me almost or over a month, I think almost a month. Um, I only gave this one a 4.5, which sounds crazy. I said only, but I gave all the other ones a 5 or a 6. So something about this one just didn't click as much. I don't know if that's because I took longer to read it, or if I took longer to read it because it didn't click as much. It's kind of a chicken or the egg type scenario. But it's so good. I don't know what else there is to say. In my January review, I give a summary of the first book in the series. This is the fourth out of, well, there's going to be 10, but there's only 4 out now. The last one will come out in December. Or the fifth one, I mean. The fifth one will come out in December. I think this book was a little bit worse because it had less backstory. The first 3 books all focused on one of the main characters' backstory, and you kind of get flashbacks that flesh out the character and you start to understand their motivations a little bit more. And since they didn't have that, all the main characters pretty much had their backstories explained by this book. They tried to fill the extra space with more side characters. And I don't know. I never really felt bored. I enjoyed the side characters, but it's just never going to be as rewarding as learning the really interesting backstory to all of your favorite high fantasy characters. It was just more engaging. I'll focus on like Navani and her Fabrials, which is like, it's okay. I don't hate it. It's just I'm not into that stuff as much in fantasy. Especially at the start. Navani was like, I don't really care what you're doing, girl. But towards the end, I was like, oh, fuck yeah, Navani, let's go. I would definitely say this is the weakest in the series. But I mean, it's still leagues better than like half the other books I read this month. And it's amazing. And if you like high fantasy, fucking what are you doing? Go read Stormlight right now. Do it. You'll love it. I love Stormlight. If I had to give this series overall, I'd say it's probably my favorite series I've ever read. I'd give it a 6-star. Even though this one was only a 4.5, don't care. I love all the characters. They all have a little piece of my heart. There's a little portion in my heart that says Brandon Sanderson characters. And every single character in this book is in there. So next, I felt like I needed a little bit of, like, I don't know, therapy or something. So I picked up A Psalm for the Wild Built. I had just finished reading, these big 1,200-page fantasy epics. And I wanted something a little here to pick up. This is so good. I also gave this a 4.5. It's this adorable, cozy novella about a tea monk who is kind of struggling with his purpose in life and his self-worth. And he goes on this adventure to try to find himself in, like, it's hard to explain. It's very surprising for this 150 pages. There's a lot of really good world building in here. But he goes off on this, like, self-actualization adventure. And he meets this adorable little robot named Mosscap. Here he is. And they go on this adventure together to try and find this monastery that he's looking for. In this world, robots became sentient like 100 or 200 years ago or something, and they no longer wanted to work in factories. So humans made a treaty with them saying, this part of the world is where robots can live, and this part of the world is where humans can live, and we can like travel through there, but we're not going to like build on your land sort of situation. And that's where the tea monk meets Mosscap, is in this little forest that's just for the robots. I don't want to spoil anything more than that because there's not much to this book, and I start saying too much, I'm just going to tell you the entire plot of the story. It's so good. It's so happy. It's so cozy. It just feels like, I don't know, drinking a hot cup of tea and pulling a blanket on. And I annotated the hell out of this book. For being 150 pages, I wrote like everything. Like fucking every other page in this is like tabbed. It's so good. Like I said, reading this book just felt like therapy. Next I read The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This was a gift from my mom for Easter. The concept is that there's this girl who is dying in the real world, and she gets a chance to live out all these alternative versions of her life and correct any regrets she's. And she's told that if she finds a world that she's happy enough in, she will get to live in that world forever. So it's kind of interesting because she used to swim a lot in high school and then she stopped. So she gets to see, like, what if I had committed myself to swimming fully? And then she becomes, like, an Olympic swimmer. What if I had stayed in that band that I joined in college? And then it's like, oh, I'm a rock star. And it's like, what if I had stayed with my fiance when I called off the wedding? And it's like, oh, now I'm in a loveless marriage. And what if I had taken that coffee from the cute guy that comes into the shop every day? and it's like, oh my god, now we're married and we have this perfect life. And I don't know, it was just kind of interesting seeing like all these, the kind of the butterfly effect, basically. This is just an exploration of the butterfly effect, which was kind of cool. I didn't really know anything going into this book. I just knew people, it was kind of controversial. I know some people really liked it and some people didn't. It was a lot darker than I thought it would be. Definitely check trigger warnings if you're sensitive to stuff like that. I enjoyed it enough, and there's some good quotes in here that I enjoyed. As you can see, I did tab it a little bit. And there's some good messages in here too. I can see why people wouldn't like this. It deals with like suicidal thoughts and actions, and I could see why some people could see the way that the author approaches it as insensitive. I didn't really feel that way. I felt the concept was really interesting. I don't think it was used adequately. They introduced a really interesting thing about, like, I don't know, halfway, 3/4 of the way through the book, and then they don't really ever do anything really cool with it. It was like such a cool concept, and then they just kind of lost it, and I felt like they should have explored that more. But for what it is, it's like 350 pages or something. It's not even 300 pages. Yeah, it does something. I think it could have been a little longer and explored the fantasy side of it a little more, but I think they were going more for like the lit fic kind of character exploration. So it was super predictable. I mean, I was 20 pages into this book and I knew what the ending was going to be. It was fine. I give it 3 stars. It was all right. Next I read Beach Read, another Emily Henry book. This was also really, really good. I gave it the same rating actually as Happy Place. I gave it a 4.5, but I think if I go back, I'd probably give Happy Place a 4 and this a 4.5 because I liked it more than Happy Place. This is another great Emily Henry romance. I don't really know what else there is to say about this. This book is like, it's a rivals to lovers between 2 authors who meet in college, and then they find each other later in life when they're both kind of going through a hard time. There is a B plot of them going on adventures to get like material for books that they're writing. It was well written, but like not really important to the plot at all. I didn't really care about it. But I had a great time with this book. Don't get me wrong. If you like romance, pick up Emily Henry. You literally can't go wrong. Like, what are you doing? Go read it. I ate it up. It was amazing. I'm not ashamed of that. Next, I read on my Kindle, probably one of my favorite fantasy reads in a while outside of Stormlight, and this was The Will of the Many. I ended up giving this 5 stars. Did I change it? Did I give it 6 stars? No, I didn't. I only gave it 5 stars. It was like really close to being 6 stars. Like, I wouldn't be ashamed if I said I gave it a 6 stars. I don't really want to say too much. I don't want to spoil the plot. I went into it completely blind, and I'm really glad that I did. I kind of recommend you do too if you want to read it. I didn't think I would like this as much as I did. Like, I heard good things about it on TikTok, but I kind of figured it'd just be like a whatever. I mean, I was reading Stormlight, man. Nothing can be better than Stormlight, right? And then I started reading it, and like the first 30%, I was like, yeah, this is good, but like, I don't know, is it as good as everyone says? And after that around 30% mark, it turns into like this amazing dark academia fantasy book. It's like the best thing I've ever read. For some reason, when I picked it up, I was craving something similar to A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed, which was really random because I read that like months ago. But I surprisingly picked really well. Like, I don't know how I did that because I didn't even like really look into it. I was just like, oh, I'll just pick this one. It's like kind of vibey, like A Study in Drowning is. Like the atmosphere and the setting is just immaculate. It's so good. And the stakes are way higher and way more intense than A Study in Drowning, but like in all the right ways. It's amazing. And like I thought my school was stressful, but I can't imagine trying to be Viz. Like that shit's crazy, dog. The ending, my jaw on the floor. I am still trying to pick it up. I still think about this book a lot, actually. It's really, really good. It's one of those books that you'll definitely catch a lot of details on a reread, which is why it is part of a series, but the rest of the books aren't out yet. So once the other books come out, I'll definitely reread it because I'm excited to pick up all those little Easter eggs that I missed the first time. I actually ended up rereading the last few chapters a couple times. Well, one, it was 2 a.m., so I was like, my brain was fried. But also, it was kind of complicated, but in a good way. And I had to read it a couple times to like wrap my head around it. But it was really good. And there's like a crazy reveal and another crazy reveal and then another crazy reveal. And you're just like, oh my God, what the fuck is going on? It was really complex. It's definitely not for the faint of heart. It's for someone who's already pretty comfortable reading fantasy. But it was good. I can't recommend it enough if you like fantasy. I would go as far to say, if you're a fan of fantasy, it's a must read. I mean, if the second book is even like half as good as this one, it'll be like a 4-star read. Like, this is so good. I decided to pick up The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. Is that who you saying? Yeah, Bardugo. I haven't read any of her other work. I know she's a really popular author. And her like Ninth House is like her big book. It's like big on TikTok. I haven't read it. I picked up this though. This came out this month. I really, really liked it. This is another book with great vibes and atmosphere. I ended up giving it 4 stars. It's set in late 16th century Spain, and the main character, Louisa, has magic. And at this time, of course, this is like witch trials and witch hunters time, so magic is associated with witchcraft and the devil and stuff. And it doesn't matter to Louisa. She's like, I'm gonna use my magic for whatever the hell I want. So she's a servant in a house, and she uses it for all these little mundane things. And it ends up that people find out about her powers, and she gets sponsored by this kind of sketchy rich guy to enter this competition that's put on by one of the king's advisors to find a magic user who is blessed by God. And then they can use that power to help strengthen Spain. I was on the edge of my seat for that whole competition section. I thought it was really interesting. Definitely the best part of the book. I probably should have put the book down sooner. I mean, I read this in like 2 sittings. But it was I just had to find out like what's going to happen to Louisa. Like, I gotta know. I think the magic and the characters were interesting, but I think the setting is what really sets this book apart from other fantasies. I think historical fantasies in general are just really interesting to me. I don't really know much about this time in history, and I'm sure there's creative liberties taken with this. I know it's fiction, but I definitely learned a lot. And she has like kind of sources in the back that let you know like what's real and what she made up, and it's kind of interesting. And I was really interested by the hoop jumping and all these logical leaps that these priests and these nobles and the king had to make to say all magic's heresy unless I throw a competition and find the one person whose magic isn't heresy. It's like, you can't do that. There also is a decent romance subplot, which was kind of interesting. It's basically just a lot of like dark medieval Spain stuff with a little of magic thrown in there. Like I said, I haven't read any of her other books, but I know I need to pick up. I'll probably pick up Ninth House at some point because it just was good. The only thing I would say, I gave it 4 stars, and I think the main reason I docked it so much is because the ending, it's kind of meh. It leaves a lot to be desired, in my opinion, the ending. And I saw a lot of other Goodreads reviews were kind of saying the same thing, that the story's good, but it doesn't, I don't know, end well. And also, important to note, this book does not have a vampire in it. But the love interest in this is like kind of like a vampire. He's immortal, and he like sucks magic, not blood. So it put me in a vibe for vampire novels. And that explains why I picked up An Interview with a Vampire by Anne Rice. My mom said she read these books when she was like younger and she really liked them. This book was a crime against humanity, I think. This is a take number 1 for crime against humanities that I've read. This, I listened to it on an audiobook. One thing I'll give it credit for, which is where the half star comes from, is the story is told in a really cool format. The main character, who's Louis, he's this French vampire. He's like been around forever. I don't even know when this interview is taking place, but he's being interviewed by a young boy. And the whole earlier parts of the book are kind of interesting because it's like you're getting the dialogue between the boy who's interviewing him and then Louis who's telling the story. But eventually that all goes away. I mean, it comes back at the end, but who cares about that? It all goes away, and then it's just Louis sitting there telling his story about his weird-ass life, and it's like, the book lost the plot a little bit. I think if they had kept that interview style, it would have been really cool. But then it just got worse. I will also say the way characters are described in the writing style of this book is really gross. Literally every single character, from 1,000-year-old sensual vampire to like a little girl, and also a literal baby by the end of the book. A literal like infant, like not a vampire infant, a literal human infant is described in this like very sexual and explicit way. It's just nasty. Everyone is like putting their hands to their little round breasts and pursing their plump, delicate lips. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about, dude? Just stop. It's disgusting. Just stop it. It's not that deep. I mean, is this supposed to be Louis's perspective? Is Louis just horny all the time? I don't. What? Huh? The main character, Louis, his vampire master turns this young girl into a vampire. She's like, I don't know, like 10 to 12 or something like that. And at first, I was like, I'm a sucker for found family tropes. I was like, if this is gonna be, she's all sad and alone, her parents are both dead, they died of like of the flu or something. And I was like, this could be cute. This could be a cute little, the vampire master, I forget his name, Lestat or something. He's like a real piece of shit. So I was like, maybe they can like get rid of him and then like they can just be their cute little vampire family and he can like take care of her. Adorable. However, they do not do that. They go like the Game of Thrones route. And literally there's a line towards the end of the book that's like, Claudia, who is my daughter and my lover. Huh? You can't have both. You can't have both. I'm sorry. Like, they aren't actually related. They're like born like 100 years apart or something. But just the fact, it's so weird. It's so weird. There was definitely an attempt to do something. Like Anne Rice tried to do something here. But I'm sorry. It didn't work. The idea of like, can a good vampire resist the inner temptation to become this primal evil being? I think that's a really interesting concept that can be explored in a really cool horror lit fic type scenario. And it's explored better in a different book that I will read later. But the weird pedophilia and how horny this book was, I just couldn't get over it. It ruined the book for me. I gave it 1.5. I did not have a good time. There was some parts towards the end where they found some other vampires and they had like human sex slaves who were like 12-year-old little boys, and they were like intimately describing the like unconsensual sex and like molestation they were doing to these children, and I'm like, Next, I needed a palate cleanser after that. And I'd heard good things about The Dutch House by Ann Patchett, so I decided to pick that up. It was available, and it's narrated by Tom Hanks. So I was like, that's cool. I like Tom Hanks. And this book's kind of hard to explain. It's a literary fiction book, which is always a little hard to explain, I think. It's one of those books that it doesn't really have a point. The point is just to have a good time and examine the relationships in the book. It's all about like one family and all the relationships around that family, and kind of like how long is too long to hold a grudge and where do you draw the line and that sort of stuff. Literary fiction is probably not my favorite genre. I only give this a 3.5. I think if you're someone who likes literary fiction, you would really enjoy this. But this is just like pure, raw literary fiction. No subplots, no subgenres. It's just that. So if you like literary fiction, you'll like it. For me, it was just okay, 3.5. Next, we get into the book I was talking about earlier, which is just a better exploration of what it means to be a vampire. This is The God of Endings by Jacqueline Holland. It was Barnes & Noble's like March fantasy pick or something like that. I don't know. The lady at Barnes & Noble really tried to sell me on it, and it worked. This is a story about a vampire named Anna, and it mainly follows her in 1984 as the owner of a French preschool, and then it flashes back to moments in her past. She became a vampire in like the early 1800s as a child, and then she takes on a lot of different names and personalities as she makes her way up to 1984 when the bulk of the plot takes place. My favorite part at one point, a minor spoiler I suppose, is she just starts butchering Nazis. And it's so good. She's just sneaking out there and she's like capturing like dozens of them and killing them and like keeping them in a shed so she can drink from them later. It's so sick. And she's all doing it to protect this little French village with all her friends in it. I fucking love that. The flashbacks are all like tie in really nicely with the main plot going on in 1984. And I think you slowly learn more about Anna, or Colette, which is what she goes by in 1984. And like why she is the way she is. I think it introduces stuff in a way that makes sense. Like you don't learn anything until you need to know it, which I think is done really well in this book. I would say genre-wise, it's probably closest to literary fiction. but it has some good mystery elements to it that I liked and kind of made the plot more interesting. It kind of just focuses on the horrors of what it means to live forever and what does it mean to be a good vampire and experiencing the cycle of loss for a lot longer than mortals ever would. I liked the mystery side of the story, but unfortunately, the ending doesn't really tie up the threads very well. What kind of left me unsatisfied. I don't think it pulled off the ending as well, which is unfortunately a theme now in a few of these books. There's a lot of questions that don't get answered, and they kind of just hand wave them away because it's like, oh, it's literary fiction, it's a mystery, you're not supposed to know. The ending has elements that are open to interpretation, which I would normally say I enjoy, but I just don't think it worked as well in this story. But I do really like it. Also, spoiler alert, not really, it has like a child in it. And guess what? The child is not seen as a sexual object. Crazy, crazy high bar to reach, I know. But it was good. 3.5, if I didn't say that. It was very good. Next, we have another book by Emily Henry. This is the only physical copy of an Emily Henry book that I own. This was so good. This is a rivals to lovers story about a book editor and a literary agent from New York who meet by chance in a small town. And let me tell you, the banter in this is unmatched. I've literally never seen a romance novel, a romance movie, literally any form of media with characters that have this much good chemistry. It's so good. I laughed out loud so many times reading this. It's so funny. It's definitely my favorite romance book I've read. I ended up giving this 6 stars. I just enjoyed every second of this. Did I read it in one sitting? I think I read it in either 1 or 2 sittings. It was so good. I love these characters so much. Charlie is probably my favorite male love interest ever. Like, I don't even want to say any more of the story. If you like romance novels, you will love this. If you like silly romantic comedies, you will love this. And I think it particularly does a really good job of acknowledging the common tropes that are found in this genre and in this kind of form of media, rom-coms, whatever, without it being like too cheesy or wall-breaking. I think if you're someone who rolls your eyes at the clichédness of romance novels, I think this would maybe still work for you because it's not that it's not cliche, but it acknowledges them in a way that makes it work better, I think, if that makes sense. Next, unfortunately, let me explain, okay? Let me explain. I won't bother summarizing this. Everyone knows Twilight. I had a great time reading this book. Was it horribly written? Yes. Like 80 to 90% of the time, this was a horribly written book. Was it unbelievably cliche and cringy and YA beyond its wildest dreams? Yes. Did I have a great time reading this? Also, yes. Edward definitely has some like major red flags. It's probably hard for you to tell. I got this book secondhand, so ignore the like food on the side of it or whatever. It's probably hard for you to tell. But there's gray and there's pink tabs, and the pink tabs were moments that I thought were like actually genuinely good, and I was like, oh, like this romance novel is kind of pulling it off. And then all of these gray ones, which is like I don't know, like 75% of these tabs are like cringy or poorly written or red flags. Anyways, it's kind of good. Like I said, it was just a fun book to read. It reminds me a lot of the movies. I watched those back when they came out, and again, semi-recently. It's bad to the point that it becomes enjoyable again. My favorite, I have to say, my favorite part was the awful attempts at like subtle foreshadowing. At one point before her first day of school, like towards the beginning of the book, Bella thinks to herself like, I don't know why I'm so scared. It's not like they're gonna bite me. Bella, what are you? This book is so good. Like honestly, I would have given it a 3, but the last third was just like so boring. I was like, honestly, I don't care. So I couldn't give it that. But like vibe wise, 2.5. I gave it a 2.5. I didn't say that. I gave it a 2.5. But like vibe wise, this was at least a 4. But like genuinely, this is so badly written that like I can't justify giving anything higher. Yeah, and like I said, Edward has some red flags. He's creepy. He just like watches her sleep and watches her. Although I would say it comes off as less creepy in the book than in the movie. Like when she just wakes up and he's just like staring at her. I don't know. It reads better in the book because it's from Bella's perspective. So I don't know. You kind of sympathize with her weird thoughts about Edward. And he's also like he's 117 or something like that, or like close, and he is obsessed with this 17-year-old girl. I've read worse things this month, so I'm not even gonna really judge Edward for that. It's just like one of those things that I noticed. I think if you go into this book with an open mind and you don't take it seriously, like do not take this book seriously. This is a goofy ass book. but you'll enjoy it. It's silly and goofy. It's so stupid, but it's so fun. I have to admit, I had a lot of fun. Um, Next, on audiobook, I listened to The Three Body Problem. This had a Netflix show come out recently that I haven't watched, but I wanted to watch the show and I was like, oh, I should read the book first. So I knew absolutely nothing going into this book. I didn't even know it was sci-fi. I literally had no idea what it was. It's a sci-fi book. It describes a few different time periods from the Chinese Cultural Revolution, and then it's like a few decades in the future, or it's like modern time. I don't really know. They have like technology that's far more advanced than we have, but I think it's supposed to kind of be like modern times. And basically, back in the 1960s, there was a secret military project that was designed to make contact with aliens. This book is very nerdy. It is not for the faint of heart. At least on audiobook, there's lots of physics and science and math being thrown at you. At some points, it literally felt like I was having a college textbook read to me. But I never really found it boring. The way the narrator read it, it almost kind of seemed like a parody of like how silly and over the top all this physics talk was. So I was laughing through it. I thought it was kind of funny. And the book can be pretty campy. Towards the middle of the book, there's this large section focused on playing a VR game that one of the characters believes is related to the aliens. This game is actually called The Three Body Problem. And in order to calculate something that could save this video game's fictional world from assured destruction is solving the three body problem, which has something to do with there's like three suns. I'm not going to try to explain it. I would get some of it wrong. I don't know physics. I took one physics class in the last like 7 years, so I'm not going to try to fucking explain it. But basically, they're trying to solve this really, really complex math problem, and they don't have access to computers in this VR version of the world. So instead, they train all of these soldiers to do basic like of and or gates. So like if you know anything about programming or like Minecraft Redstone, you'll know about gates. And so they trained all these people to be gates and like raise different colored flags based on what other people around them were doing. And they literally designed like a full computer with this. They had a CPU and memory and hard drive. And it's all just people raising different colored flags. And they all try to compute this really complex problem. And I'm like, this is so unrealistic and so campy, but it's so silly. And it's just like one of the examples of how creative this book is with its problem solving and its like introduction to different concepts. And this was probably my favorite part of the book was this whole VR game, and then like specifically this whole computer thing was so funny. It like really stuck out to me. But there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on in this book. Put me in the mood for sci-fi, which unfortunately I'm stuck reading Twilight, so I won't get to for a while. But at some point I'll pick up some more sci-fi because I think this was really fun and it made me enjoy sci-fi again. Because really the only sci-fi books I've liked are Dune, which hardly even pass for sci-fi. They're basically fantasy. So this got me excited. I think I can enjoy sci-fi if it's creative like this. The last book that I read this month, I finished it like literally 3 minutes before midnight on the last day of April, was New Moon. I think parts of this book were better than the first one. Don't get me wrong. But the lows were like way lower as well. I loved the whole middle section. It's like all her getting to know Jacob and learning about the werewolves, and it's great and it's sweet and it's cute and it's pretty much all you could ask for in like a YA paranormal romance. Was the explanation and exploration of the depression that Bella goes through in this book very surface level and boring? Sure, but it was fine. My expectations are set very low with the Twilight series. My favorite part in this book is Bella tries to this like guy from work invites her to go to a movie, and she doesn't really like this guy, but she knows this guy has a crush on her. So she's like, well, that's great, I'll go to a movie with you, but we're going to invite all of our friends. So she invites like all of her friends and Jacob and all these people, and they all cancel on her except the guy who asked her and Jacob, who obviously we know is like in love with her. So it's her and two guys who have a crush on her going to see a movie, which like first of all, like why didn't you just cancel like immediately? But they go to the movie and she sits in the middle of them. Also a crazy choice, Bella. Why would you do that? And throughout the movie, they both sit with their hands up like this on the armrest so that she can hold their hand during the movie. It's so awkward. Like, what a lame ass group of boys. Like, what the fuck are you doing, Bella? Leave immediately. But it's also hilarious, and this is totally something I could picture like high school boys doing. But then right after this, all of a sudden, whoa, Edward is gonna commit suicide, and whoa, now all of a sudden we're hopping on a plane to Italy. But oh no, it's fine. We talked Edward down, so that's okay. Now the book's over. Huh? What? Where the fuck did this come from? I genuinely think that Stephanie was like, we gotta get Edward to come back. How can we get Edward to come back in the last like fourth of this book so that he can find out about Jacob and everything? And it's like, oh, we'll just have everyone fly to Italy, I guess. It made no sense to me. The last fourth of this book just takes such a wildly incomprehensible U-turn. I just cannot justify giving this book any higher than 2 stars. If the book had decided to do pretty much anything else for the ending, I probably would have liked it. I probably thought it would have been better than the first book. But, I mean, in the first book, flying off to Arizona for 2 random chapters at the end just for Bella to have a near-death experience for, like, no reason, that was already over the line for me. Silly, goofy, weird, kind of ruins the plot. This is a romance novel. But now we need to go to Italy to raise the stakes. Fucking Arizona wasn't far enough to fly. Now we gotta go across the world, not just across the country. Bella is so annoying. With Edward especially. She was fine with Jacob, but with Edward, she's so annoying. She's constantly like, Edward, do you really love me? How could Edward love me? Edward must not really love me. Do you think Edward really loves me? It's like, girl, shut up. Like, he was gonna kill himself because he thought that you were dead. Like, obviously he's in love with you. Like, just shut up. Just shut up. Like, I'm inside your head and I don't want to hear that anymore. She is really, like, an anxious attachment codependency queen, and I love that for her. Note to anyone reading this book that isn't already an adult, if your entire happiness is associated to the men in your life, go to therapy. She dated Edward for 6 months in between the first book and the second book. And then he is gone for I think it's like over 4.5 months. And then she starts hanging out with Jacob, which is at least like another month or 2. And then she's still like depressed by the end of that. Like, girl, if the depression is lasting longer than the length of the relationship, like you've got issues. Go to therapy. This is probably going to be a long video. I read a lot of books. 18 is a lot of books. And I'm still reading Twilight. I'll give you a little spoiler for next month. I read the 3rd book in Twilight. Where did the fun go? Where did the goofy silly go? Now it's just people assaulting Bella and her dad trying to make it sound like that's okay. So anyways, if you want to see my reviews before I make a video, I do post all my reviews on Goodreads now, so you won't just get the star rating, you'll get like my full thoughts written out, which is basically the script that I use for the videos anyways. So if you like to read them better, they're on Goodreads, so follow me there. Also on Storygraph, I don't know if you can like follow people on Storygraph, but I'll link that. I did want to say this was my best book or best month in terms of reading. I thought maybe it would like tie for February because I read a lot of big books in February, but I read a lot more books this month. But I actually read an average of like 280 pages a day this month. Like, yay! Yeah, I don't know. That's probably good, right? I like basically doubled what I read last month. Reading Breaking Dawn right now and listening to The Cruel Prince on audiobook. Anyways, thanks for listening to my book reviews. I hope these help you pick some good books. I'm always down for book recommendations. So if you want book recommendations or you want to give me book recommendations, please do that. Okay, thanks. Bye.